Welcome to I Could Talk to You All Day. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, recovering workaholic, perfectionist, and people pleaser.
And I'm John Spears, emerging from playing small, getting caught up in the inertia of life, and always being on.
I Could Talk to You All Day is a show for executives and emerging leaders. This is not just another leadership podcast. We're here to talk about what it means to be a leader while also being human.
So join us for raw, vulnerable, and probably pretty funny conversations about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted. Let's get the conversation started. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, John.
How you doing today?
It's been a rough week, John.
Yeah, it has been a rough week. There is a lot going on. And I think I'm still trying to process what happened, what it means, how do I move forward, and what's my responsibility as a leader, both to myself, to the community in which I serve and lead, but also more broadly to other folks in the US and globally.
It's been a shocking week, which makes me feel a little dumb because we knew this was coming. And it feels so easy to not address a thing until it's here and then feel surprised by it.
Mm-hmm.
And as leaders, I'm a leader, you're a leader, our clients are leaders, our community is full of leaders. We have that happen a lot. We have it happen when there's gun violence. We have it happen when there's racial unrest, when there's a new pandemic. And now here we are again with companies feeling caught off guard because they have to respond to this Roe v. Wade decision and this new lack of women's protection. And we don't know what to do. And as leaders, we just jump in to help. It's exhausting. We forget about ourselves. We forget to grieve. We forget that we get to be loved and to be human. And I think we're going to talk all about that in this episode. But it has been a week where it feels like once again, and for a whole new reason, the world's been turned upside down. And as a leader, I'm supposed to know what to do.
Right. I think as a leader, when things are calm and quiet and there's equilibrium in the world, it's not necessarily easy to lead, but it's much more intuitive. There aren't these distractions. There aren't these emotions and these experiences that are kicked up in ourselves that we have to deal with all the time, and in moments like this, and you said it, when the world is upside down and we are having a very personal reaction to things that are happening in the global community or in the US, as it is in this case, it can be really challenging to lead authentically when we're having a human experience, when we're having our own personal reaction to something. And so I think I would really love to explore that with you, Lauren, this idea of leading others while you yourself are having a reaction or a response to something that's happening in the world.
I'd love to tell you about my emotions over the last several days.
Yeah.
Because I think it really is a pretty typical path. My very first reaction was, who needs me? How do I stand up for other people? How do I get in the ring and get into this fight? What do I do? And I went right into action mode. And my body and my emotions and my heart went numb because I felt like I had a job to do. And I spent that first day supporting others, reacting logically, reacting with my rational mind, my thinking mind, but not really having a deep reaction to it. And then I woke up the next day and I could barely move. And I think that is so typical of leaders that we know we're in charge. And whether you're a CEO or whether you're in HR or PR or just in leadership, just managing people or leading your peers, you feel this responsibility to check in on everyone. And it's exhausting. Waking up on Saturday and really feeling the impact of this change in protection, this removal of protection of my body and my being, and all of the women and people who this affects, not just in the US, but with the US as an example, across the globe, felt really heavy. And I took an entire day to be quiet, which is not the way that I think most leaders do. Because that initial feeling, that initial numbness, that initial action orientation just keeps going until you collapse. And that's the stuff that breaks us. It doesn't have to be. There are better ways, and we're going to talk about that. But when we are leaders and when we feel the pressure and accept the pressure to just be in charge, be the stand-up person, women, make your Wonder Woman pose, hands on your hips, and show everybody you've got this. It's exhausting, and it doesn't allow you to care for yourself. And you can be a very good leader in the short term when you are there for other people. In the longer term, it will burn you out. And we just talked about burnout. It's a great way to burn out if you're not willing to take care of yourself inside of a crisis and after a crisis. What about you, John? What was your reaction, response? How did this all go for you?
So for me, it was like a punch in the gut. I think we all knew that a decision like this was likely. I think we all knew what conservative activist judges have been trying to do in the courts and also in policy. But it was a very different reaction and response from me when when the decision came down, as opposed to when I heard that it was a likely decision. And I immediately thought of the impact on my daughter, who's 13. I immediately thought about all those women in states, in red states, where they're going to ban abortion and where women are not going to have access to the kind of healthcare that they need to be safe and to be healthy. I thought about particularly the Black and brown women who are going to be adversely impacted by this decision. And then I also thought about me as a gay man. I thought about the right to privacy, contraception, all of the sort of knock-on effects that this decision likely will pave the way to restricting rights for people. And I was gutted. I was in a meeting and they announced it, and it was like a punch in the gut. I felt like all the air left out of my body. And frankly, I felt an immediate sense of despair of how am I going to bring change? How can we bring change against a system that is rigged against us, that there are a powerful few? It's not even in the US, a majority of people support a woman's right to choose. And still, this decision came down. And so there was a real sense of powerlessness and hopelessness that came over me for a little bit. And in that moment, I really needed to slow down. I really needed to breathe. We talk a lot about that together, and in these conversations, slowing down really just helps to bring things in perspective, and breathing gets emotions and energy moving. So I really had to do that before I was really able to get in touch with how I was feeling, what I was feeling, and the choices that I was going to make moving forward around being active and in leading others in this response.
On my third day, when I woke up, my passion to do something returned, right? So there was like numbness and then despair. It was a great word for you to use. And by giving myself a break and by giving myself the time to just grieve for a day, And then seeing the next day how impassioned people were, and seeing groups forming to do things, I jumped right in. I think as leaders, we are taught that our only job is to lead and manage and make things better and handle stuff. And when our boss does it wrong, to be on the cleanup crew and to do damage control. And while I had the freedom this weekend to just handle my stuff personally, and I didn't have to report into somebody who needed crisis messaging or response messaging or something to talk about, some talking points, not everybody has that freedom. And I haven't always been in that position. When COVID started, when George Floyd was murdered, when other things have happened, I have always been the person, because I was HR, who wrote the messaging, who coached my leader on what to say in public. The pressure to be there, the pressure to be on, is only sustainable until it's not. So when I'm thinking about leaders now who are inside their companies, who are finding out that their companies are contributing to Republican PACs that support anti-abortion movements, that support anti-LGBTQ movements, that support freedom to gun access, it can break your heart as a leader to learn that about your company. And it can be really difficult to reconcile standing behind your leadership and helping to craft the messaging. There will be a point in time, and it could be a couple of days, and it could be a week, it could be a month. There will be a point of time where you have an opportunity to rest, and you get to choose that. But as a leader, you forget, because you really want to take care of everybody. John, I'd love to hear, what do you think people can do? You're in a corporate experience right now. You're in a nonprofit experience right now. And you're managing people and teams and your own emotions and your own response and your own reaction. What are you doing to both take care of your people and take care of yourself?
Thanks, Lauren. So, I had a very different experience on Friday when this decision came down. I was actually in a meeting when I learned of it, and I had the opportunity to be able to lead and to have a conversation in the very moment, just minutes after it was announced. And I think when we think about leadership in organizations and in times of crisis, or in times of despair, or in times of collective trauma, which is what I think nationally and globally we're going through. We've had a long stint of really challenging circumstances that have been one wave after the other. And so I think our resilience is a little low, but I think, as a leader in these kinds of moments, it's really important for us to take care of ourselves first. Kind of, it's a different experience maybe than what you had, or what our natural reaction as leaders to do is, we have this inclination to do, to fix, to lead, for action. But what if in moments like this, we just showed up authentically? What if we were able to show up and to communicate to our teams that we're struggling, that this is hard, that we don't have all the answers, and then create the space to allow other people to show up? And I think for me, the times when I felt most impactful as a leader is not when I was doing, but when I was showing up and creating space for other people to use their voices, to be able to communicate their pain, their despair, their challenges that they were experiencing in these types of moments. And it's kind of like, I'm kind of reminded of being on an airplane, and you've heard this a million times, they go through the safety demonstration. And it's like, if you're with a child, put your mask on first before you help someone else. And I think as leaders, there's no compartmentalizing our lives. And I think if we try to, in moments like this, show up like nothing's wrong, like we have all the answers, people can see through that. I think our teams and our colleagues don't resonate with that. It's sort of like if you get in a car accident right before you arrive to work, and you show up and you're like bleeding from the eyebrow, and everyone's like, "Whoa, are you okay? What's going on?" You're like, "Oh, totally fine. Let's get this PowerPoint presentation down." Like, it just doesn't resonate. It doesn't click. And so I think in moments like this, it's really important for leaders to be able to access their own experience and to be able to communicate that and to be able to be authentic. I think this idea of creating space just keeps on coming back to me. It's not about a lecture or about giving instruction or doing the business of leading. I think it's really about creating space for people to be able to sit with this experience and assure them that it's going to be okay.
What I'm hearing you say, John, is to recognize the value in vulnerability, which is really hard for leaders because we are taught as we come up in leadership that at each new level, we're responsible for the people who report to us. We're setting an example. And the learning that I had up and coming in my corporate career was that that meant not being vulnerable. What I have since learned is that the more vulnerable I'm willing to be, the more people hop on board, want to help me and want to help with messaging and want to help with figuring out what people need. As leaders, I think we forget that we can't know everything. For this decision from the Supreme Court, there is no precedent for this. There is no other time in recent history, in probably most of the people in the corporate world, having experienced a Supreme Court overturn like this, a protection of rights, a protection of body autonomy being stripped away so quickly, immediately followed by, and we're going to come after all the other protections too. Right. So you cannot be expected as a leader to know what to do. You can be expected to figure it out, to collaborate, to ask questions, to offer support. But just like with COVID, and I was in the corporate world when COVID happened, everybody turned to me, and rightly so. And we were all looking at the news and we were all finding different resources. But it came down to what's happening in the HR world, what are companies doing, what should we do? And it was one of the first times in my career where I said, I don't know what the right answer is. And I feel that way now. And I think a lot of leaders feel that way now. We don't know what the right answer is. We don't want to invade people's privacy. We want to support all of our employees. And like you said, the majority of people in the US are pro-choice. And while the voting on SCOTUS did not reflect that, there is a lot of outrage inside companies with individuals. And it is very hard to know what to do. And you are allowed to be a human being while you're figuring it out. And that means being vulnerable. That means showing your humanness. It means saying, I don't know what the answer is. And also being willing to collaborate to figure out how to do whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, Lauren, I want to go back to this idea of vulnerability. And I think how important it is all the time in leadership, but particularly in these moments. You know, I think people just want to know that they're okay. I think they just want to know that their feelings are quote normal, they're normalized, that they're not alone in feeling this way or experiencing certain things. And I think as a leader or as leaders, we have an opportunity to normalize those experiences and to allow people to be able to sit with those emotions, those feelings, those experiences, however they are. So Lauren, now what? We've talked about, as leaders, our natural inclination to take action, to lead, to care for the people on our teams and in our organizations, and also the need for us to take care of ourselves. How do we do both and?
Such a great question. And I'm going to start by telling you I don't have the answer. That's the vulnerability. I would love to be in this room with you, telling you the 14 steps to take to get from here to there. I love that you said both and, because it's not an either or situation. And I think between not knowing all the answers, knowing that you are a leader in this particular situation, and knowing that you can take action, even if you don't know what that is yet, you combine all of that and you get to be both human and an action taker. And for some of it, you're bound to your company, to your leadership, to your position in your company, to support the needs of the actions of the organization. You're bound to support your employees in a bunch of different ways, including being a human with them. But you also have a responsibility to yourself to look for those moments, to look for those times. And it could be 5 minutes to close a door and breathe. It could be several hours that you take off, or whole days that you take off, and make yourself unavailable so that you can spend some time on you, so that you can have the balance of, I'm taking care of the people in my company, I'm taking care of myself. And because you have that time and you're deliberately taking and making that time for yourself, then you can decide what you want to do. Do you want to be a person who takes all of the actions, gets really big into response and fight? Do you want to be a person who sits back and listens for a while and learns? You get to decide. But if you never pull yourself out of the action, if you're just always going, and you're just always in reaction mode, then you're making it an either or, not a both end. And the real opportunity, I think, is to make it that both end. There is room for you in your own life. There's room for you in your personal decisions. And I think you get to make those choices.
One of the things that you said really resonated with me, and that's this idea that there is no formula. There isn't a 14-step plan to figuring this out for yourself or for your staff. And so it's really important, one, that you know yourself, that you create space in your life to be able to know what you need, know how to connect with yourself and support yourself during some of these really challenging times collectively, but also if they happen personally. And also being intuitive enough and tapping into that around what your team needs, what your people need, and how to give that to them.
Yeah, for sure. I think the bottom line is you have to remember you're there. You're in the room with you. And you deserve as much time and energy and love and empathy and leadership as you're giving to your employees, your teams, your coworkers, people in your community who you're taking action with.
Well, Lauren, as always, I could talk to you all day about this.
Absolutely, John. I'm so appreciative that we both came in to do this special episode, because it doesn't quite fall on our schedule, but it felt like a really important time to come in and talk to our community and really be in this conversation. We are here to have these really real conversations and to really be in community and show our support. Thanks for being with me, John.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for listening today. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at icouldtalktoyouallday@gmail.com with your comments, questions, and topic requests. And subscribe so you don't miss an episode.